So you've been around the project a lot longer than me. How would you describe OpenStack governance and how it differs from, say, everyone compares with the kernel, so maybe we should get that done first. What do we do, and how is it different, and how is that good?
All right, so we try to be very egalitarian. We do the opposite of the benevolent dictator thing. We do not want a benevolent dictator at all. And we do everything we can to try to prevent one from happening, Monty Taylor notwithstanding. Right. Yeah. Apparently he's Willy Wonka, is what I'm hearing from the audience. So at any rate, a lot of the CI system that Michael mentioned earlier, a lot of our governance structures and things like that, they're all designed around the idea of egalitarianism. We want anybody to be able to join the project and pitch in and start writing code, start doing reviews, and have their work all go through the same process no matter who they are. And so I think that's, and actually there have been some articles in the press like, oh, well, OpenStack would be great if only it had a benevolent dictator. And we tend to think that these, people who write articles like that aren't really paying attention. They're not understanding what we're trying to do in the community. So I think that's the biggest difference between us and the Linux kernel.
There's certainly a lot of voting, right? So every patch is voted on. There's two governance bodies, the technical committee and the board, and they're both elected, and so on. What's the difference between the technical committee and the board? How would you explain that?
Lightly.
Yeah, the line can be blurry sometimes. There's a foundation that owns the trademarks related to OpenStack, and it's sort of this. It's actually a trade organization. So all of the companies who have developers working on OpenStack, they join the foundation and they help sponsor. The development is still out on the edges, but things like our twice yearly summits and conferences. There's a lot of central coordination of marketing, of course, the issues and policies around dealing with the trademarks. All of those things are handled by the foundation, and so that foundation has a board of directors, and so what we try to do is get people on that board who are in that space, people who are thinking strategically about how all the companies who are collaborating on this project are going to work together and those kinds of issues. The board is explicitly in the bylaws prohibited from making technical decisions about the project itself, which I think is actually really cool. So, there was this concern, if we have this body with people on it who are appointed by big companies, and what if they start saying, oh, well, now you have to use Java for everything? I mean, that would be terrible.
It
right?
would be horrible.
Yeah. So to protect against that sort of thing, the bylaws explicitly say that technical decisions are the purview of the technical committee, which is an entirely elected board in the community. And so the people who are eligible to vote in the elections to elect the technical committee are the contributors to OpenStack itself. If you submit a patch and it gets merged, you'll get a ballot for the next election. And so generally that board is composed of developers or people who are really active in the project, not necessarily hackers, folks working on documentation, things like that. But basically, you end up with people who are really working on the project in all of the senses of that word, getting elected to the technical committee, where decisions that affect the project at a technical level are made. So I hope that sort of illustrates the different kinds of bodies
Mhm.
that those two are. So,
So, question from the audience. We've described the board and the technical committee, but we also have these things called project technical leads. What are they?
do we have any in the room?
Yes.
Robert's one, but we can pretend he's not.
Right. So, right, Devananda. Hey, if you're a PTL, raise your hand. So, the
And new one? Or, a new one as well?
yes,
Oh, you did, right.
that wasn't a demonstration. Sorry. Raise your hand like this. OpenStack is composed of a lot of individual projects, and each of those projects has its own community of developers, and we try to keep everything consistent between them so that people can move around fairly easily, and we don't end up with this sort of balkanized set of projects. But still, you're going to have a group of people who are interested in working on compute versus networking and things like that. So you end up with a group of a set of developers who are really focused on projects. That set of developers is, again, eligible to vote. You mentioned there was a lot of voting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're eligible to vote in an election every 6 months to elect a leader from among themselves for that project. So that's called it's probably called the program technical lead at this point.
That's probably true.
Yeah. It's sort of interchangeable. Anyway, the technical lead for each of the programs they're the closest thing to a benevolent dictator, but really only within their project. And it's not the sort of thing. Sorry.
A lot of responsibility, not a lot of power.
There you go. A lot of responsibility, not a lot of power. Yeah, it's a leadership role, and it's a tie-breaking role if needed. But the expectation is not that this person is the project and they get to decide everything. No, the real power in terms of deciding what code gets merged comes from the core review team, which is, again, a group of people that is built up from the developers who are focused on each project. This time it's not really an election, it's not a formal election, and the core review team for each project is, it's...
Everybody here who's core raised their hands.
So that was everybody who's core. So each project has a set of people who can approve code to merge, and they're called cores. Florian, I've seen you, but I'll get to you in a second, okay? So we have these people who do business stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And we have this technical committee who do technical stuff. And then there's these PTLs who have no power, but just beg you to work on stuff. Do you think there's any value in having technical people on the board? If they're just doing business stuff, should the techies just ignore them?
Right. So we do have a couple of technical people on the board, and so it's hard to think about this in the abstract. I think about it very specifically, and I think some of the most active and really passionate people on the board come from a technical background, and I think it's really useful. I would not agree with the assertion that technical people can't think strategically about the project, which I think if you're saying technical people don't belong on a board of directors is what you're saying. So yeah, I think there's the theoretical possibility that you'd get somebody with tunnel vision, somebody who can see the forest for the trees on the board, but I think the people that we have on the board are really good at thinking strategically about the project as a whole, thinking about, what are the use cases, what are the business cases for this project, and how should the community as a whole be dealing with those things.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to interrupt and stop the questioning for a second and say, this to me is an important distinction. I've kind of got a bugbear at the moment. So I meet a lot of people who say, well, Ceph is part of OpenStack, for example. And this is not true. So the OpenStack community has spent a lot of time coming up with an open, merit-based governance process. Most decisions are made by consensus or at least are debated, etc. And there are projects on the edge that don't conform with our expectations. So you can totally use Ceph with OpenStack, no one's going to stop you, it works fine, it's great. But it is an important distinction that it is not governed in this way. So ultimately, things might happen that aren't in OpenStack's best interest, and we have no control over that because they're separate. Bruno, are you going to disagree with me?
No, I just want to ask a question on this topic. Why does Swift differ from all the other projects in OpenStack, where you have a dispatcher and a set of plugins you can use to fulfill the calls as a backend? And Swift is the only project that enforces a backend instead of allowing projects to a series of backends.
Okay.
Because this is a common architecture you see in all the other projects, and Swift looks like the black sheep.
Yeah. So it's a long question, so I'm going to answer the question and explain the question as I go along, if that's okay. So I said before in the introduction that originally there was a government body and a commercial entity and they had separate projects and they decided to work together at a Mexican restaurant. So NASA had a compute project called Nova, which is what I work on. And Rackspace had an object storage system called Swift, which is what Bruno's asking about, effectively. And those two projects decided to work together, and it's grown over time to include a bunch of other projects. And one of the fundamental reasons that Swift is a bit different from Nova is because they were separate projects when they started. Nova has kind of been used as the poster child for all the other projects. So Nova has a pluggable backend. We kind of don't specify what hypervisor you should use, for example. Sorry, did I say Nova's the compute project? Hopefully I did. So, you can use Hyper-V if you want, or Zen, or, KVM, or whatever. And, we don't have a driver for every possible hypervisor, but we have a lot of drivers. And Swift doesn't have this plugin layer, mostly because it wasn't a priority when Swift was first written. I have talked to people who say they are moving in that direction, but I don't work on Swift, so I don't want to commit them to something. I would suggest you have a sit down with John Dickinson and have a chat. John's at the conference. He's the Swift PTL and has he been forever? Certainly for as long as I've been involved.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And so he understands this history a lot better than I do. But I agree it is a difference, and a difference that doesn't make me completely comfortable. I can see, a Nova style, there's a business logic layer, and then kind of the actual bits stored on disk kind of driver layer. Yeah.
Well, the arranger coding stuff is bringing in more of that, but it's not bringing in arbitrary backends, it's bringing in different behaviors within one code base. I think one other thing about Swift that's worth noting is that it's a full implementation of a whole bunch of logic, whereas Nova is an arbitrator for existing tools. KVM and Zen are existing hypervisors. Bare metal that we put in Nova, we're taking out because Nova's not meant to be implementing lots of complex logic.
Yeah. So Nova is fundamentally a hypervisor management system, whereas Swift is a complete end-to-end solve this problem thing. Now, pardon?
Not enough.
How many open source object stores are there? I can think of 3 off the top of my head, and one of them you shouldn't use because it's in the Nova code base.
Sheepdog, Ceph, Swift, Walrus.
Okay, I feel like listing all the object stores is kind of boring though. And Florian has been the world's most patient man and had a question, so fire at will.
No, just a suggestion about the whole benevolent dictator part.
Uh-huh.
I think one thing that's sort of important about our PTLs is the fact that they are actually a dictator as in the sense of the Roman Republic, which means your term ends after 6 months, and then you stand for re-election. So while it's a benevolent dictator position, it's not a benevolent dictator for life. And if you actually screw something up, you are going to be removed, and everyone knows that. I think is sort of an important distinction versus what other projects are doing, which may be fine, but OpenStack does it a different way, and for me, it's always been something very important for the PTO.
Yeah, so for the video, Florian is saying that an important difference is that our PTLs are elected. It's not a position for life, which means that they have an incentive to act in the best interests of the community and build a consensus and so on. To be honest, I can't think of a single time a PTL has just driven something through without discussing it with people. Mostly because I don't think it would work, right? Unless they were going to do all of the coding for that thing by themselves. And they'd still need core reviewers to approve it, right? They can't just they could, in theory, merge it unilaterally, but it would get reverted. And they'd probably be unelected at that point. So we have 2 more minutes. Is there another question? Yes, you there with the nice hair.
So what sort of voting mechanism is used? Is it like converted or is it something else?
I can't even pronounce. What's the voting mechanism we use for elections? I can't even pronounce Condorcet.
I pronounced it, so it's Condorcet, and we use the CIV's implementation of it from Columbia, CIVS.
The question is who votes, and the answer is it depends on the election. So, yeah, board elections, so the business types, it's complicated actually, right? Because there are segregated sets of board seats. So Platinum Foundation members came and gave us a very large amount of money and do every year. So there's a set of seats that those guys get to vote for, and then gold members vote for their pool of seats. But then there's also a chunk of seats that are voted for by any individual member of the foundation, which can be anyone. You go to a webpage and click sign me up. The technical elections, so technical committees, PTLs, that kind of thing, you have to be an active technical contributor, which means effectively you're a developer, but the bar is super low. It's like has landed 1 patch. So if you put in
Jump in here?
Anita's going to tell me I'm a liar. Yes?
The technical committee elections, the electorate has to have, for the one just passed, it was the 2 releases prior. So for the elections for Ice House, it was people who have a patch in Grizzly and Havana. So for the PTL elections, they had to have it in that repo that was associated with that program, and some programs have multiple repos. And for the technical committee, it was everybody who had a patch in any of the official OpenStack repos.
Yeah. So basically you have to have a patch in a repo that's within, say, it's 12 months-ish. The bar is deliberately very low, but it does mean you've got skin in the game, right? So if you want to go and do a single one-line grammar fix to a doc, you're an ATC and you can vote.
It's also worth mentioning that the system's optimized for developers because that's the bulk of who we're dealing
there is
with,
an
but
exceptions process.
Yeah, and we do currently we've granted ATC status to 2 people who are not developers. At least one is a user experience person.
I think they were both.
Both user experience person.
It was the Horizon PTL who advocated for that, and the technical committee had to vote on that. It was a unanimous agreement. And they have active contributor status for 2 releases, and then they can vote on their particular project, which was Horizon, as well as the technical committee elections.
We'd love to automatically identify user experience folks, usability testers, folks like that, but we haven't figured out a way to do that yet, so this is the best we've come up with.
And so the other thing we should say here is the reason we're kind of back and forth a little bit, apart from being disorganized, is because we keep changing the plan, because we keep optimizing it. So the exceptions thing I think was always allowed by the bylaws, but the first example was in the last couple of releases. And if we discovered, I feel like as a community, if we discovered we'd made a mistake, we would just fix the mistake. We're not particularly emotionally bound to the exact words in the bylaws at the moment, although specifically changing the bylaws is a lot more work than just having the TC randomly say yes. But yeah.
One other thing I'll just say. The other thing is that any of these roles, we define the roles, and the roles are not specific to people. So I've run a couple of elections, but I played the role, and anybody who is willing to play the role can run an election. You just have to step up and do it. So all of what we're talking about, everybody has different roles, but we're defining the roles as we go along, but anybody can play it as long as you get in there and
yeah. And we were talking about project technical leads, and then we sneakily changed it to program technical leads. That's because we made up programs in the last 6 months because we thought we needed them. So people still have this mental mapping to a different meaning of the word of the letter P. And people can also wear more than one hat, right? So I'm a core reviewer on 2 projects. Apparently I was a core reviewer on 3 projects, but I didn't realize I was a core reviewer on the 3rd, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah, no, I didn't even realize I was an ironic core, which I thought was ironic. And I said on the TC, I'm an OpenStack ambassador, etc. There's nothing stopping me running from the board apart from the fact that I don't have the time, right? So it's not like we say, oh, you're PTL and therefore you're excluded from, I don't know, being on the board, for example. We totally let that happen. So, yeah. It is a big board, and I think it's a lot of work to do right. Anyway, we have run over